All right. And let me know when you're ready.
We are set.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you once again for joining us for another Chamber Leadership Series event. My name is Brian Stevens. And as always, it's a distinct honor for me to serve this region as the president and CEO of the Hampton Roads Chamber. And as all of you, at least I hope you know, we are the chamber that's unapologetically pro-business. We believe that our role in the community is to set the conditions so that businesses can be a success. And one of the biggest businesses that we have in this entire region, of course, is the Port of Virginia. And we're very, very blessed to have the port right here. And we're very blessed to have its new CEO with us today. I want to welcome you all to our second Chamber Leadership Series event of this year. And this Chamber Leadership Series is a series of events that we started several years ago to bring prominent business leaders, military leaders, educators, elected officials to talk to our membership in an effort to inform them and to educate them and in some way help them be better business leaders and help them drive their business to greater success. So again, this is the second in the series this year, and we're very fortunate to have with us today's keynote speaker, Stephen Edwards. As you guys know, Stephen is a fresh face to the leadership here in Hampton Roads, and in fact, in his position within the entire state of Virginia. And Stephen, we're just so glad to have you with us today. Before we get started and introduce Stephen, I do want to recognize our sponsors. You know, we couldn't do these events without the generosity of our sponsors. Our Chamber Leadership Series presenting sponsor is Southern Bank. And you'll be hearing from Ben Ellington here in just a couple of seconds. But Ben, I just want to say at this point, thank you so much for all that Southern Bank does to support the business community here in Hampton Roads. I also want to thank Dominion Energy, who is our gold sponsor for the series. Thank them very much. And our silver sponsor is the Hampton Roads Workforce Council. Sean Avery and his team does such a great job of providing a talented workforce to meet the needs of our business community. And finally, I want to thank Inside Business for being our media sponsor today. So with that, Ben, I'm going to turn it over to you to make a few comments and introduce our keynote speaker.
Okay, thank you so much, Brian. It truly is our pleasure to be the presenting sponsor for the Hampton Roads Chamber's Leadership Series. I'd like to share some really great news about Southern Bank's leadership efforts in our communities during the pandemic. Over the last two rounds of the SBA's Paycheck Protection Program, Southern Bank made 4,800 PPP loans totaling $460 million. As a result, we were able to quickly help employers throughout our region keep nearly 75,000 employees on their payrolls. And we're obviously very proud to have played a big part in what was truly a nationwide effort by the U.S. banking industry. Now, we like to say we're the oldest new bank in town, and we really mean that. I'm very happy to tell you that Southern Bank turned 120 years old this year. We had humble beginnings in rural North Carolina, but we now have 70 banking offices from Raleigh to the Outer Banks and 13 serving Hampton Roads. Our newest office in Newport News, where you can find me, covers the Peninsula and Historic Triangle. If you or someone you know needs a hardworking business bank that will do what we say we'll do, please check out our website, southernbank.com, or reach out to one of our local offices so we can welcome you to our growing family. Now, our speaker for today's program comes to us from the Virginia Port Authority, where he became the CEO and Executive Director in January of this year. Stephen A. Edwards is responsible for the broad programmatic areas of business and relationship development, infrastructure development, strategic marketing, economic development, finance, security, and safety. He oversees the operations of Virginia's marine and inland terminal facilities to include the Virginia International Gateway, Newport News Marine Terminal, Norfolk International Terminals, Portsmouth Marine Terminal, Richmond Marine Terminal, and the Virginia Inland Port. Stephen is a globally experienced leader in the maritime industry with extensive operational experience and a proven track record of growing businesses and creating long-term value for customers and stakeholders. Before joining the Virginia Port Authority, Stephen served as the CEO for TraPac, and prior to that, served as the CEO of Global Container Terminals. He was educated at Aston University in England, where he earned a Bachelor of Science in Transportation Management, which has served as a foundation for his long and successful career. It is my pleasure to welcome our speaker, Mr. Stephen Edwards.
And thank you for the kind introduction, and nice to meet everybody. Unfortunately virtual, but such is the way of the world, and hopefully it'll be over shortly and we'll be back to doing these sessions in person. So I'm going to take us through a few slides to talk about what's going on at the port, and then be very happy to take a Q&A session and any questions that people may have as we get towards the end of the slide deck. So if I can just skip to the next slide, please. So just as an agenda, what I'll try and cover with you today is the economic impact of the port, what happened with COVID-19, what happened in our world of ports and trade during the past 15 to 20 months, run through the modernization of the Port of Virginia, a program that's been ongoing for a number of years and has been successfully implemented. So what's happened within the port, what is going on in the port, cover our service metrics, how are we operating, how are we servicing the trade, talk a little bit about some of the other ports and what's going on there and why we may be in a better position than they are. And then to finish up, just talk about some of the continued investments that we're making in the Port of Virginia and in our facilities. So on the next slide, this is just really a quick overview, one slide to talk about the economic impact of the port. And this is the result of a study we did with William and Mary some years ago. And really just to go through our role as an economic engine for the businesses in Hampton Roads and for the businesses throughout Virginia and beyond. And really just to show, we know very, very well that in a port complex, we touch about 1 in 10 jobs, or we have some direct or indirect impact on about 1 in 10 jobs in the Commonwealth. And that has a large impact on your businesses if you're trading or importing or exporting as a whole. So we're very conscious of our responsibilities to make the port a success. If we're a success, then invariably the private sector can be a success. We'll move on to the next slide. And I just want to talk a little bit about what's been going on in the world in terms of import countries. It's really just to give a feel for where are we trading? Where is the Port of Virginia trading with? Where on the import side, and I'll come in a moment to the export side, where are the volumes coming from? And no surprise that China is the largest importer into Virginia on our cargo base. But if we recall from when the tariffs on China started really on the prior administration, it led a lot of importers to really concentrate on where else can they produce. And for the East Coast of the United States, for the Port of Virginia, it's really important that for us that cargo originating in Southeast Asia or South Asia continues to grow, because that is the cargo that we can secure the best for this gateway, the cargo that can come through the Suez Canal and we can gain. So to start seeing India as the #3 importer, Vietnam, which is the fastest growing producer at the moment. So Vietnam's the fastest growing, India is the second fastest growing, and Indonesia. That all gives us great encouragement that more and more cargo will be heading our way through the Suez Canal to the East Coast, as opposed to going from northern China through the West Coast ports to get to the Ohio Valley and other hinterlands. So we're positive about the prospects for further growth from Southeast Asia. If we go to the export side, again, no surprise, China is the biggest receiver of our goods. They receive a lot of our agriculture, they receive a lot of packaging materials that are going, if you think we're the consumer over here, we have to send back our used packaging to be repackaged for the next set of consuming goods to come in. But again, we're seeing growth, Indonesia, India, Vietnam, Thailand. So good, strong growth in Southeast Asia, and the core business in Europe is remaining strong. So we've seen growth in the last year on both the import side and the export side, both of which are positive to us. If I move on to the next slide, this is really to give a view of what happened with COVID. I think if we all think back to March of 2020, February, March 2020, when the pandemic commenced. And really what happened at that time was the Chinese factories closed. When China went into lockdown, and we saw this big decline of January, February, March, and April in the case of the Port of Virginia in import volumes. And the big question, I think every executive in international transportation, every executive in shipping and imports was, is this going to be a U-shaped recovery? Is it going to be a V-shaped recovery? Are we going back into the scenario we had in the economic crisis of 2008, where it took a long time to recover? And the answer really was, we saw this very, very sharp recovery as we went into the fourth quarter of last year. So when we look at August, September, October, this very sharp recovery, both in the United States as a whole and in the Port of Virginia as a whole in import TUs, which is our measure of really of container flow. And this, as a number of you will be aware, was driven by the buying patterns that we've all experienced. Vast growth in e-commerce gateways or e-commerce channels, significant growth in home improvements. If any of you are trying to order furniture right now, you will know what the time lag is to get furniture or big electronic goods delivered at the moment, appliances. And this is really that big surge of home improvement, home gyms, retail consuming through e-commerce, pushing big, strong growth to levels which we hadn't experienced before. November of 2020 was an overall record for the port. This is just showing the import side. April was a record, and May will be a further record. If we look at the export side, sorry, the next slide on the total volumes. So this includes exports and empties. So you'll see slightly lesser ebbs and flows in the volumes. But overall, the volumes are up again across whether we're repositioning containers back to Asia for more importing or we're taking out exports. And our exports have been up through this period as well, which is really positive to, in particular, the agricultural trade, as we've seen a significant opportunity for them to grow their business as well. And we've had to take some measures to help service that trade as well. So that really just gives a quick economic overview of what happened, what has been going on in our sector, which has been somewhat remarkable in the recovery from COVID. At a total level, the number of jobs in transportation now is above pre-COVID levels. We've been a very fortunate sector of business that we haven't suffered like the service industry suffered. We were able to rebound very, very quickly. So if I move on to the next slide, and really just want to talk about our terminal modernizations. There's been significant investments made in the Port of Virginia from the private sector and also from the Commonwealth as a whole. And that modernization funding was about $800 million, some private, some public, is complete. And that's given us great capability and capacity. And I just want to demonstrate this in a couple of slides. On the next slide, it's just an overview of what we refer to as Virginia International Gateway. This is our facility in our modern containerized terminal in Portsmouth. And all of the area to the right of this picture, so from the midline to the right, was an expansion project that was completed in 2019. So it really increased the capacity, doubled the capacity of the facility. We brought in more modern cranes to handle larger ships. This week, we handled, just 2 days ago, the largest ship ever to call on the United States East Coast in the containerized trade, and it called at this facility a vessel called the CMA CGM Marco Polo. And you'll see on the far right of this picture, the rail facility, which is taking the rail out to the Midwest and even further. And that facility has been really performing to a very, very high level, very close to its design standards in the last couple of months. So a really good, busy and efficient modern terminal and giving good service levels. On the next slide is the Norfolk International Terminal that was completed in May of last year. And what you'll see here on the picture is really, it's a bit of a mirror image of what we built in Portsmouth at Virginia International Gateway. Same technologies, same cranes, same systems. And it's exactly doing what you would hope, is that you've taken a great product at Virginia International Gateway and replicated it at Norfolk International Terminals. And of course, some enhancements as well. So we've been able to provide excellent service through this facility as well. And this one has really given us some capacity to handle the surge of cargo that the whole nation has been experiencing in the last few months. Take to the next slide. This is just the last 4 months of volumes for the port. TEU is our measure of volume. So 20-foot equivalent is a containerized equivalent, but really it's really to demonstrate the percentages. And when we look at this, our total business is up about 26%. And it is worth noting that while there was some COVID impact in April of 2020, it's really a case of that the bigger changes will start hitting us in the next couple of months and year-over-year comparators. So we're up 26% year-over-year. We're up on exports by 12.6%. We're up on imports by 25%. And then we're returning all those unused containers back to Asia in the empty loadouts. But you'll also see our rail is up 26% and our barge is up 20%. Our ship calls are up 11%. So really, it's a very positive picture. There's not a negative number at this point on a year-to-date basis. If we move to the next slide. This is our financial performance on our fiscal year. So our fiscal year runs July through June. So this is July of 2020 through April of this year. So you'll see our volumes are up, our revenues are up, but most importantly, our expenses are down compared to our budget. So we have been able to realize the efficiencies from the modern automated terminals with the end result of significantly improved operating income and significantly improved EBITDA. And I'll come on to that, what that allows us to do in terms of investments in a few slides' time. The next couple of slides, we'll just talk about some of our metrics. And this slide talks about how do we service trucks. One of our critical roles is to be able to handle thousands of trucks every day, thousands of transactions, and to do so efficiently. So the left-hand graph demonstrates the bar is the volumes that are moving through us in any month on a truck basis. And the lines, the green or the blue line, is showing our traditional turn time, so when a truck arrives to when it leaves, or an expanded turn time, which might include time to process the truck into the facility in the first place. But our service metrics have been operating above or better than industry standard throughout this period. Throughout that growth of volume that came August, September, October, and has continued in March, April, we've been able to service the business exceptionally well. The right-hand graph is the rail volumes and the rail dwell. The rail dwell being the time it takes measured in hours from when a container is discharged from a ship to when it's actually dispatched out of the facility on the rail. And you'll see there again, we've been able to maintain, in cooperation with both of the Class 1 railroads, the Norfolk Southern and the CSX, to keep managing the rail volume in an efficient way as those volumes have grown significantly, up to now close to 60,000 moves per month. We go to the next slide. So the good news here is we are a bit of a diamond in the rough. The supply chain of North America has really struggled during this surge. And these are just a couple of headlines that we picked out in the past. But the key here is that the largest gateway into the United States is Southern California. And they have had significant problems between rail backups to warehouse backups into port backups, as a lot of the e-commerce goods came through. Then we've seen this flow over into other locations. I mean, places such as South Florida, which you'd never expect to see significant problems. And and even Atlanta and Savannah. And Georgia has been a big competitor to us in terms of economic development. And to see them having some port issues is really, really quite strange. The fact that we've been able to operate so efficiently is good for the businesses here. It's also good for our reputation, good for our brand building as we move forward. So let's just say we're operating well, our capabilities are improved, we're modernized, and people who are using us are not seeing some of the problems that they're seeing elsewhere. So what are we doing going forward? If I quickly move on to the next slide. Really two things that we're doing at the moment, or maybe three things that I'll touch on. The first is further deepening of our channels and widening our channels so that we can more efficiently handle the larger container ships that are operating. Our industry hit the news when the vessel, the Ever Given, managed to block the Suez Canal. That ship was about, I think, a 23,000 TEU size ship. The ship we handled 2 days ago, the CMA CGM Marco Polo, was 16,000. So you can see we're beginning to get up to the closest of some of the largest ships that operate. We can handle the largest ships, but we want to handle them even better. So to do so, we're dredging the channels down to 55 feet, and we're widening them in the thimble shoals. You'll see those two bars at 427 meters and 396 meters. And really what they are passing lanes. They're to enable that as a large ship is coming in and a large ship is leaving, they can pass in a lane as opposed to be on a one-way transit. We have a very great maritime advantage in the port because of our proximity to the Atlantic Ocean channels, but this will further enhance those channels, and this should be complete in 2024. Go to the next slide. And this is a picture of our Norfolk rail yard and what we intend to build. So the lower part of the picture, or the middle part of the picture, is the existing rail facility. And you'll see just above it renderings of some new container stacks and some new cranes. And that's a central rail yard expansion that we will complete in 2023 and will break ground on later this year. It's a $75 million investment. We will self-finance that. And it'll add another 260,000 container lifts of railroad capacity, of efficient railroad capacity, to help service the Norfolk terminals. And what we're actually building here is a mirror image again of the technologies that we've deployed in the Portsmouth facility. So we're replicating what we've successfully deployed in Portsmouth and putting it back to work in Norfolk. And on the next slide, it's really just to talk a little bit about Portsmouth Marine Terminal, which is the picture, as you'll see, is where the cruise ships tied up during the start of the pandemic. But this is the facility that we are reconditioning to be suitable for the offshore wind industry. So this is where we are in discussions with a number of potential customers to use this facility for the offshore wind industry. It is a very, very good facility because there is significant laydown area, which is what is required for that industry, and where the legislature has set aside some monies to allow us to do some site improvements to enable that. So this is another exciting development for us, and there will be, I'm sure, a lot of folk are interested in how that will develop. But this is how the facility that we're going to be using largely for that industry. And with that really concludes. I think concludes my presentational side, and I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Stephen. There's certainly a lot of great things going on at the port. And again, I think Priscilla put it into the chat, but if anybody has any questions, just indicate either in the chat or the Q&A button at the bottom, and we'll be sure to open your mic and let you ask your question. I was going to ask a couple of questions, Stephen, but I should have known that you were going to cover them. I was going to talk a little bit about the status of deepening and widening the channel. We know how important that is. And so it looks like that's on track. I know there's some additional federal funding that you're looking for. So hopefully we'll keep that on track. And I believe you said it'd be complete in 2024. Are there any concerns on your part for completion of that on time in 2024?
So there are a few hurdles to get over, Brian, I think we have presently the first part of the dredging is what is known as the Thimble Shoals East. That is 95% complete and is slightly ahead of schedule. So that's on course. We will put out to bid later this week the dredging contracts for Thimble Shoals West. So they will go out to the private sector for bidding through our procurement teams. Those, I think the bidding for those will be through June to start dredging in the second half of the year. All of that funding is funded by the Commonwealth of Virginia. That's the Commonwealth portion of the funding. The second part of the funding will need to come in from the federal government. We need what is known as a New Start designation from the administration for that. And I think we're very, very hopeful that we will secure that. So we haven't slowed down. We've used the state portion of the funding first, or we're using that first, and then we'll go straight into the federal side. We have both sides of the aisle, the complete Virginia delegation on our in support. So there's total bipartisan support within the Virginia delegation for it, and I think we have some very charged up political leaders leading for us. So we're quite confident.
Yeah, I'm confident and hopeful as well. I know we've got Drew Lumpkin on the line who represents Senator Warner. So Drew, just ask you to take note of that, please. You also talked, Stephen, about the Portsmouth Marine Terminal and the potential that has as a offshore wind hub. And we really are trying to leverage and exploit this offshore wind opportunity that we have 27 miles off the coast. Could you expand a little bit on what the plans are out in the Portsmouth Marine Terminal to help support that burgeoning industry?
Yeah, I can't say too much because we're in negotiations. I can't say a lot. But what I will say is this: our role as the port here is to enable the big stuff to happen. That's what I say, is to enable the large pieces to move, to start with the significant assembly of what's going to be required offshore. That capability, as we put that to use with the providers here, really, I think, will establish the industry in Hampton Roads. From that should come not only the employment that will be generated on the port property, but when you think about servicing that industry, there will be many, many locations which are nothing to do with the Port of Virginia, which will then come into play as we really act as the bigger facilitator to help the energy providers and the OEMs here to actually get to work. I think once they're to work, all of those ancillary industries, whether it's servicing or otherwise, there will be many waterfront locations in the private sector that can hopefully participate here. So I think it's a question of as the industry gets going, as the approvals come through from the federal side to allow the wind farms to go into production, then we'll begin to see a bigger snowball effect of the private sector play. We're not trying here to be an operator. Our role here is to be the landlord, to create the facilities that allow the private sector to go to work. It's not our expertise to build a wind farm. We're just here to help the businesses do it.
But the fact that we're looking at that terminal to facilitate this industry is fantastic. And Stephen, and I know there's a lot of activity going on right now with the maritime industry in the region. And I'm going to put Nancy Gurdon on the spot, because I think one of the really innovative things that has happened within the last year or so is ODU's creation of the Hampton Roads Maritime Collaborative. And Nancy is running that. Nancy, if we could open your mic, could you just briefly tell our audience a little bit about that organization and what you're doing to support the maritime industry?
Sure. See if the mic is open. Is the mic open?
Yeah, we got you. Thank you.
Okay, great. So first of all, thank you for that. And Stephen, a belated welcome to you to the region. It was great actually to meet over at the auxiliary, the hub that the Hampton Roads Alliance and ODU's offshore wind, ODU's Open Seas Technology Hub are co-sponsoring. But to Brian's question, I think what's exciting here in the region is the region has really realized, and this is broadly based, that we have an amazing array of assets and opportunities here that are truly unsurpassed. And some of them are naturally made, some of them are man-made, and certainly the port is prime among them, as is offshore wind, obviously as the presence of the Navy, the transatlantic cables. I mean, there's just a confluence here of opportunities, and even some assets that we don't always necessarily connect to maritime that relate to Wallops and JLab and so on. And so really what the Hampton Roads Maritime Collaborative for Growth and Innovation is all about is recognizing the incredible impact of all of those assets for economic development and innovation for our region. And it's a young organization representing a number of organizations, including, of course, the port. And its goal really is to think about how to make 1 + 1 = 5 in terms of leveraging the assets here in the region. And related to that also is Old Dominion University. That's actually my employer, where I had the Institute for Innovation. One very exciting opportunity is ODU has really stepped up to be put together an initiative to be globally recognized as an institution focused on maritime opportunity innovation. We'll have a lot more to say to that in the coming months, but I am happy to report that we have a proposal. It has been reviewed by our Board of Visitors, Budget Authority, and so on, and hopefully we'll be able to talk more about that. And it's an exciting opportunity, I think, not only for ODU, but more importantly for our region at large. And again, I think what you are doing in terms of all of the trade, everything with the offshore wind industry is really quite exciting. And we look forward to working with you, certainly, as we move ahead on all of these opportunities.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. I think what you're leading is only going to help, right? Because the innovative side of this is, there's a lot of unknowns. I think we all recognize the real advantages we have for this industry, but there are a number of unknowns, and I think this whole collaborative approach is going to help bring it all together. I really do.
Yeah. Thank you, Nancy. Sorry for putting you on the spot.
Oh, that's okay. I'm happy to be put on the spot.
I got to tell you, Nancy, I'm impressed. Tom Frantz always talks about 1 + 1 = 3. You want 1 + 1 = 5. So
I think it can be 5.
I like it a lot. And I think we have a couple of questions, one from Andy and one from Rob. So I don't know how you want to handle those two, but go ahead.
I'm going to go ahead and unmute Rob first. So Rob, if you'd like to ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So Stephen, I'm curious to understand better the major competitive ports of the East Coast. How do you rank those? And what efforts will the Port of Virginia, under your leadership, pursue to drive our ports to beat the competition as it stands and stacks today?
So Rob, yeah, I think for any business, although we're a Commonwealth-owned business, we're no different than anybody in the private sector. You have to do competitor analysis, and you have to know where you stand. So I think the way we kind of look at the business is, how do you define your competitors? And we could go round and round in circles on that for a long time. But in principle, there's two things that we need to try and achieve to do in terms of pure competition. One is bring more business to the United States East Coast port range in the first place, which is, the population of the United States lives east of the Mississippi. It's in our overall interest to bring business through the Suez Canal or through the Panama Canal here, than it is to necessarily take it through West Coast ports and rail it across the country. So we're always in the business of trying to attract more business on shipping routes into East Coast ports as a whole. And then once it's coming to the East Coast, of course, our job is then to get it to Virginia, as opposed to go to some of our competing ports. And the competing port range for us is largely New York through Savannah and ports in between. So I think if you look at the Port of Virginia, we've got significant advantages on the maritime side. So we've got proximity to the ocean channels. We're a shorter marine transit. If you think through some of our competitors, Savannah's got a significant river transit. Baltimore's got a significant Chesapeake Bay transit. So we're we're from a ship side, we are significantly better off. We've got modern facilities which can handle these large ships, and we can handle them efficiently, and our efficiency is improving. The flip side is we're further away from the population base. We don't have the tri-state area of New York, New Jersey, Connecticut that the Port of New York does. We don't have I-95 on our doorstep, which Savannah has, for example. So the key is, how do we connect our waterside advantage into and overcome some of that landside position. So we're really trying to move our mindset away from being just the port, and talk about how do we become a supply chain enabler, and how do we help an importer or an exporter, how do we help them lower their cost of doing business or improve their efficiencies by connecting through to, whether it's I-95 or beyond I-95. So for example, Rob, we talk about the Richmond Marine Terminal. It's still relatively small, but it's been growing at about 25% CAGR. We think there's a lot more potential there, so we're going to be looking at doing some investments there so we can improve that product. So that gets freight from Hampton Roads straight up onto I-95 in Richmond. Likewise, if we're looking at some of the transload opportunities on the ag export side, we're looking at how we can help some of the transloaders in this area lower their cost of doing business. And in fact, I was with one last night where we're talking about some things we can do with them. And how do we move beyond that gate? So as an example, we operate an intermodal chassis fleet. We're one of the few ports that actually operates it ourselves. It's a significant advantage right now during supply chain disruptions. So now we're also going to look at refrigerated chassis supply to help in the refrigerated market at a time when there might be asset shortages. And then the ultimate one is, how do we get site readiness? How do we actually get to a position where in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we've got sites that are further along the readiness scale so that we're speed to market. We've just reached the point where there are some spec buildings coming back into the Hampton Roads area. There are some spec buildings going up in Suffolk right now. We'd like to be able to really shorten the time frame from when somebody says they want to enter the market to when they can actually be in the distributional translate space. Historically, we've been a little bit behind, particularly Georgia. So we've got a bit of catch up to do. So our discussions with the Economic Development Partnership and with some of the municipalities now is going to be very much along how do we improve that site readiness position so that when we have people who are interested in this area, how do we get them speed to market? I hope that helps.
Thank you.
I think we have a question from Joe Donnelly. Joe, if you'd like to go ahead and ask your question.
Sure, thank you. Stephen, welcome to Virginia Port Authority. And I am a retired railroad executive and been involved in transportation projects for many years, things such as supporting the third crossing, those type of activities. My concern is that at some point in time, the demand for the Port Authority services may outpace the potential of the transportation facilities in Hampton Roads area, especially. And I was wondering what your views on that were. Do you think that we will reach a point where the volumes coming through the port exceed our ability to, or the potential volumes coming through the port exceed our potential of servicing that demand through our transportation system?
So Joe, I think it's a great question of how do you do wider infrastructure planning? And I trust that the answer to the question is that we're going to be ahead of on the planning side to know how to move ahead. I think all of us have to recognize that transportation has a congestion issue if we don't get it right. It has a carbon footprint issue if we don't get it right. We're going to be very proactive and have been proactive. And we're going to be really trying to lead a charge on how we decarbonizing our our own port operations. So how do we electrify more and more of our equipment, or take it down to more of us closer and closer to a zero emission for our own business? The value of these modernized terminals is that we can provide excellent truck service, and we can really do that on an appointment driven and to some degree deploying AI basis. So that does allow us to be very, very smart about how we interact with the trucking market. So we shouldn't be creating significant congestion, in terms of our own traffic. We should be efficiently handling it. It should be coming in a metered, efficient way to handle it. So we've got our side of running our operations well. If we don't run our operations well, it will spill over into surrounding communities. So we don't want that. Then the other side of it is, how do we do more and more rail, and how do we do more and more barge? And we've built at the Portsmouth facility, Virginia International Gateway, we've built significant rail capacity, and we're just now going into phase one of Norfolk International Terminal to build phase one there. So we really need to do this ongoing conversion to rail, and some of that rail won't be so far. I mean, it's not, traditionally, as you'll know, when we talk about rail, people will talk about Columbus or Chicago or Cleveland. But now what we're going to really begin to see, I think, is much shorter haul. We're going to see some degree of truck conversion into shorter haul rail. It's going to take a number of years to put it right, but I think there'll be some movements on that in the second half of this year, and I think there's some recognition that is going to have to be part of the wider transportation planning. It isn't going to take away from the need to widen the corridor between Newport News and Richmond. We're going to have to those items, or the efficiency of getting from Portsmouth to Suffolk, those efficiencies are still going to have to exist. But I do believe that what we can really increase the proportion of our business that is rail, and rail today is about 34% of our book. But there's no reason why that portion can't grow.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Joe, for that question. And I think Andy Bain had a question in the chat. I don't know if he's still on or whether you want to ask that question or what.
Yeah, Andy had to step out. I believe you already addressed the second part of his question, but did you want to expand on what is the cause of the positive trend in business?
I'll try. I think if the economists are on, the positive trend in our business is largely driven by spending patterns as a result of the pandemic. So if we think through what we did when we went into social distancing, or if we went into lockdown, we did a number of things across the nation. First of all, we've poured a lot of stimulus dollars into the economy. So we've allowed, over the course of the last 12 months, most households have saved money or have built some spending capital. We haven't spent on services. We haven't obviously spent on travel. We haven't spent on hotels. We haven't spent on restaurants in the past 12 months. And we converted a lot of that expenditure into home improvements, home gyms, and other recreational goods. And that is the stuff we import. So if you're buying furniture, if you're buying appliances, I can tell you I am, because I've just moved to Hampton Roads, and I can assure you that the lead time to get a range or the lead time to get a refrigerator is very, very significant. The lead time to get a bed at the moment is 3 months. So that is a heavy demand sector that is seeing strong consumer purchasing. You may have read on from the Wall Street Journal and others the delays that Peloton took when there was that boom in Peloton purchasing that was going on. So if any of us on this call, or anybody equipped a home gym, if anybody's bought a sofa, if anybody's redoing a kitchen, all of that is going on, and we know about what's going on with the price of lumber and home improvements. All of that is creating demand for goods that are largely produced in Asia, or in the case of granite countertops, are coming in from India. So you're seeing that's the cause of the boom. Now, when does it stop? And transition. And I think the interesting thing will be there is clearly some lag to catch up with. So that has to happen. So that will keep, I think, demand strong for the next month or two. And then also there's going to have to be, we foresee a change also in goods that are going to have to be bought, such as apparel. We're all about to go back to our offices. And I don't know about you, but I think sitting in your shorts and a shirt on a Zoom call is going to have to go away. And we're all going to have to go and get some more pants, and we're all going to have to go and get some new shoes. And that apparel industry is going to have to go through a catch up. So I think it's really a question of the stimulus dollars, and working from home created a significant purchasing patterns. And if there's further stimulus dollars coming into the economy, there's no reason why that shouldn't continue for going forward. But at some point it will normalize, and typically our business will grow in, very close to GDP. So as GDP normalizes back down, then we should expect trade growth to slow back down to a normalized GDP. But if GDP is at 6%, as it is now, 6% growth. But if that's going to go 6.42, as people like the IMF say it is, then I would expect our growth rates to go 6.42 as well.
Yeah. Thank you for that answer, Stephen. And I'm glad that I'm not the only one that did the Zoom meetings in his Bermuda shorts. Stephen, I have a question for you. We value the port so much here in Hampton Roads, and we just want to see it succeed and to grow and continue to develop and really be a juggernaut for our economy here. When you look at the port 5, 10, 20 years from now, what do you see?
I think what we're going to see as we look forward is what we have today is, as a port complex, we have really this scenario on the East Coast of New York, New Jersey, with a lot of cargo coming into New York, New Jersey to service that tri-state area. And then ships come either down the coast, coming from there through here on their way down to Charleston, Savannah, or sometimes the reverse patterns. I think what we can really see successfully is these ships are going to upsize. That creates the need for surge capacity. And it really plays into a sweeter spot for us with deeper channels. We can get the rail off quicker. We can get the rail moved quicker. So our ability to be a through gateway is better than, for example, New York, New Jersey, who's going to have to really use their capacity for a lot of their local demand. So we've got that gateway capability. And if we could, the skill to this now is tying this into logistics park development. And allowing which is where really the private sector comes in the investment dollars, is where does the private sector come in to build big transload facilities to enable us to move imports on, or if it's the reverse with the export market. So I do think at the moment that if we look at what's going on in some of the things like the Suffolk Logistics Park, or we look at some of the facilities up in the Richmond, Henrico County area, there are some significant opportunities. And how the port plays in those, either as a facilitator, enabler, a seed investor, I don't have that answer today, but I think that's something we're going to be working very hard to try and say, how do we create the environment that lets the private sector come in to do what they do so well? So we've got to avoid stepping over that line of where we are the facilitator to create the private sector position, but we've also got to create the environment that the private sector doesn't come to Virginia and say, it's 2 years here and I can do it. I can get to the same place in 1 year in Georgia. So we've just got to say, okay, we've got to create the capability that the private sector dollars can get to work as fast as they can in some of the other states.
Stephen, I see the chamber in a supporting role with the port and really the business community at large. What can we do to help you and your great team there at the port to accomplish your mission? What can we do that maybe we're not doing now? How can we help you?
Well, I think to begin with, Brian, let's start with these events. Let's keep talking. So the more we talk to you and your membership, the more they talk to us, the better our understanding. I think there are, you can be our advocate. You're a strong advocacy body. That's your role. So I think the more you understand how we help your businesses, your membership, then whether it's advocating with our federal legislatures regarding dredging channels, the more you advocate on our behalf, the better. And we appreciate that work that you do and the other chambers do on our behalf there as well. The wider infrastructure planning for the area, advocating for the improvements that are needed to some of the, particularly on say I-64 or 164, some of those improvements that we hope to achieve. I think they're equally important, the wider benefit for the area. Keeping us informed. If you're hearing, if you're seeing roadblocks, constraints, hurdles that have got to be overcome, one way I'll be challenging my team is when you see a hurdle, it's not a barrier, it's a hurdle. You can get over it. So how are we going to get over it? I think that's equally important. I think the other one is, having come from outside of Hampton Roads, is as an outsider looking in, Hampton Roads is quite a confusing place. Right? You don't really know if you're Tidewater, Hampton Roads, Norfolk, Portsmouth, Newport News, right? You don't actually know, when you get inside of Hampton Roads, you find out it collaborates quite well. And that may not always have been the history, from what I'm told, but I think you do find out when you get inside that there is a lot of good collaboration. But we've got to tell that story externally, because from an external perspective, you look at it and say it's quite confusing. So I think if there's one thing I would urge anyone in your role, Brian, or any of the other roles that are out there, is how do we make sure that we have got that outward facing to the beyond Hampton Roads, beyond Virginia look, that people say, okay, we know what Hampton Roads is, or is it Norfolk, or is it Newport News, or is it 757? That we bring it all together and market ourselves to all of our advantages collectively.
Well, Stephen, what I'll tell you is we're working on it.
Yep, I appreciate it.
Yeah. It's not easy to change decades of culture, but we're hammering away at it every day, and I hope that your team there, especially Kathy and Andrew and everybody, knows that we're strong advocates of the port and will continue to be strong advocates of the port. I think that's all the questions from our participants, but I just have one last question for you, Stephen. How do you like Hampton Roads? You mentioned you're not from here, but how do you like Virginia? How do you like Hampton Roads? And what are your initial thoughts?
So far, so good. Really enjoying it. I've been really welcomed. I really appreciate the fact that everybody from the work from directly within the port or the wider business community has been really welcoming, really helping get on board. It's never easy to come into an organization in the middle of a pandemic and say, okay, here I am in the middle of January, I'm wearing a mask, I'm looking at you on a Zoom call, and how do I get to understand what you do and how it works? And I think everybody has been absolutely fantastic in that approach. My predecessor, John, was great in getting the organization ready to do a handoff. The wider, whoever it has been, the folk in Richmond and the administration have been wonderful. So I really can't have any complaints about how I've been received. Been helped by the tailwinds, right? It's always good to come into a business where you got tailwinds. And we've had some tailwinds in the last few months. But overall, delighted. And we're just, now we're just, you can get out and about a bit more. It's, we'll be out and about trying to get a few more good restaurant ideas from a few people.
Oh, yes. Well, thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you for taking your time to talk to us today. And again, welcome to Virginia. Welcome to Hampton Roads. And we just look forward to working with you and your team there at the port to ensure that we do everything we can to ensure that your mission is accomplished to a high standard of excellence. So again, thank you so much for everybody on the call. Thank you for joining us today. And this concludes the second in the series of our Hampton Roads Chamber Leadership Series event. So thank you all very much. And again, Stephen, many thanks. Thank you very much.